Okay, so first of all, wow, thanks a lot. Good morning. Really, we knew that it was going to be this kind of a conversation. It's interesting, when you see California's law, the Privacy Act, which I think the CCPA is does it not stand for like California Cyber Protection Act or something?
No, it's actually California Consumer Protection
Okay, right.
Act, but with very onerous information security safeguards and privacy standards.
Right. It only made sense that major companies that are selling to every state were going to want to extend it out and not get caught off guard. And it sounds to me like because their law went into effect first, the rest of the United States are basically going to use California's version. Maybe they'll tweak it a little. You know how each state has their own thing. But now that we have Bill 64 in Quebec, it sounds like that's what's going to happen for the rest of Canada, that whatever is passed in Quebec is going to end up probably just flowing through because it'll be easier just to kind of use their legislation. Do you anticipate that happening? And if so, when do you think that law will go into effect?
So multi-factored question there. I don't know if we'll take Bill 64 word for word. I think it'll be very persuasive. When do I think privacy reform in Canada will happen? I can't say for sure, but there are indications as of early 2020 that it will happen soon. That being said, I suspect things were put on pause as a result of the pandemic. But that just means that, when you put a dish to the back burner, it's still cooking. It's not like things have stopped. So I would expect updates to be released sometime in early 2021, although that is, somewhat speculative on my end. But this is an eventuality that we're all heading toward. So whether it happens in early 2021 or mid 2021, the important point to take note of is that it will happen. And when it happens, you can't say that you didn't have notice because it's already happened all over the rest of the world.
Yeah. I did want to touch on something that you mentioned when you talk about the supply chain. One of the things we've had this seismic shift, hit with the insurance industry. And now they're starting to talk about like supply chain and bottleneck because they saw, ships were quarantined and things like that. I'm wondering if you can touch on some tips that companies can do to better help themselves, protect themselves from like maybe 3 suppliers down that chain. Are you suggesting, for example, that, everybody's contract has a cyber component to it?
Interesting question. There was a case out of Ontario that came out last month, so early July of 2020, dealing with cyber coverage. And unfortunately, I don't remember the particulars of the case. I remember the issue, but I don't remember the disposition of the issue. So if anybody wants to know more, feel free to get in touch and I'll quickly review the case again and give you a summary. So that case will be relevant to the supply chain context and how incidents can be insured in the supply chain context. But with respect to due diligence measures for supply chains, in the data context, supply chains suggest that data is being passed from one party to another. And if that data contains private information, then we've got to consider, which parties are data processors and which parties are data controllers, and the obligations will flow from that point of view. Then you have to consider, what are you doing with the data to minimize your risk? So in the US, if data is encrypted, it was thought for a long time that there should be a mitigation of liability at that point. If data is de-identified and it's encrypted, then there's no exposure in case that data gets leaked or breached. In Canada, I'm less confident that the same analysis applies, and the trend in the US is that encryption is no longer a safe haven. And half the states agree with that proposition. And the reason is, I think, there's a phenomenon called data harvesting, whereby a hacker can grab a treasure trove of encrypted data and just keep it until there's enough computing power in the future that they can hack the encryption. And then they've got all of the information open to them. So I think I've unleashed a stream of consciousness here with regard to your supply chain question. But in brief, supply chains should have cyber insurance that consider their role as a data processor or data controller. And there should be risk mitigation measures, including encryption and various other controls to mitigate the effect of a breach if it does happen.
Okay, so to end, I'm going to say you're awesome. We have
Thanks.
we have details. One piece of advice for our listeners. What's your one piece? If you're at some cocktail party and you're like, here's what I'll do.
Should hire a chief privacy officer or a chief data officer. That's the one piece of advice that I have for any company going forward that's a serious player or seeks to be a serious player in the big data market, particularly if they care about public legitimacy.
Okay, that's
get a CDO.
Yeah, you're wonderful and you're stimulating the economy. And it's funny, I knew, just like when I was a kid, I knew windshield wipers on the back of the car was going to be a thing. I know that this is going to be the number one most growing role. There's no question. Everybody has computers, everyone has data, and it's a big issue. So thank you so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate everything that you've taught us today and talked about. And I think that people are going to want to download your book and keep your name as a reference if they do have questions.
Sounds great. Oh, and I should say that the book is free on the Smartblock Law website, can also be purchased in hard copy on Amazon. Big Data Law in Canada is the title.
And we're going to make sure to get that information out for those people who really like to have a good book to carry around with them and to look really super smart. There might be some purchases. So thank you very much for doing this. And I hope you have a great day and we'll keep in touch, okay?
Thanks, Judy. Thanks, everyone. Hope this was helpful. Take care.
Yes, it was extremely helpful. That was a really good talk. I really appreciate it. Now, our next speaker